Okay, so I'm excited to have my guest Ryan Schachtner. You know, we've known each other for a couple of years now. Which is great, and welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I mean, yeah, we've known each other for a couple of years, and it's been a good couple of years for sure.
Yeah, and I'll tell the audience how I met you, and we're going to get into this too. Is you wrote a book, the foundation for financial excellence for athletes. And I forget where I saw it. It might have been on, you put something on LinkedIn, maybe you posted it somewhere, and I'm like, that's right up my alley of what I'm trying to accomplish up here. And I just went out and bought it, and I read it, and it was phenomenal. And then I'm like, I got to call this guy. I don't know if you remember that. I reached out to you. I don't know if I emailed you or texted you, I forget. And I said, can we chat? And you were very gracious. Hey, no problem. Whenever you want to talk. And I think the first time you and I spoke, we probably spent over an hour on the phone, just like
Yeah, I
talking
remember
about all
that.
this stuff you're doing, down
I
there.
was at our beach house. I was at our beach house, and I was running around taking care of the kids, making sure they didn't make too much noise.
Yeah,
And
I do
yeah,
remember that. I remember you said hey, it might be a little noisy with the kids, but that, and I was mentioning before, when I read books, I write the date down. So it was January 16th, 2022 when I read your book, and you've done some phenomenal things in the last couple of years. So we're going to get into all that. Um, but I'd love to, start out, Ryan, if you don't mind, is your story. In the book, you tell your story, and it's an incredible story that I think so many athletes should read, should listen to, and understand, because it became who you are. It's what created who you are and where you're at now with your profession and your life. And you wonder, like, if you didn't have that athletic experience, where would you be now? Right?
man, I needed that athletic experience, right? Because I'm dyslexic, and school was never my strong suit, right? So I needed an outlet that I could experience success in, and that was athletics for me. That was baseball. And when I was 13, I had kind of accidentally gotten into a Atlanta Braves. No, this is in the '90s, so the Braves were like the team,
They're
right? Now they
big.
didn't many championships, but they always played for them. I've found myself and kind of stumbled into like a scouting camp that they had, and just because they needed another catcher, and it was guys that were, again, I'm 13, and it was guys that were, in college, and they just kind of took to how I was performing, and from there on, they always kept in touch with me. And, to me, I thought, all right, I have a chance now to be successful, because in school, I wasn't very successful. So it was a downer for me. It was,
Mm.
I fail at, one thing after the other. And so to me, athletics was that outlet to experience something and experience success.
Yeah. So dyslexia. When were you diagnosed with that?
So in college, funny thing, because it wasn't, it's much more known now than when I was going to high school and everything. But it started with me. I can still, to this day, I can read a book, 5 or 6 times, and I can recall nothing from it.
Mm.
And so in order for me to read and understand something, I've got to read it like 10 times. And so, you're not going to read a book for a book report 10 times. And so I couldn't, even in the cliff notes, those were a lifesaver for me, but you
Yeah.
couldn't get everything out of it when you had to write the reports. And so in college, I finally went and saw someone and got some help for it.
Wow. So college baseball, what was the motivation? What was the drive to go from high school, to college?
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, at 13, like I mentioned, talking to the Braves, and it was always, hey, we're going to get you, we're going to draft you. That time period in Major League Baseball was the home run era. So Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire, they were duking it out for the home run title. And so it was the power era, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you were a home run hitter, you got looks. And I was a very good catcher. I had a very good arm, an above average arm, and I could hit for average, but I had one home run in my career.
Mm.
And so I wasn't a power hitter. So I needed to, in order to make it to that next level, I needed to go to college. in order to get bigger, get stronger, and that sort of thing. So for me, college, I didn't necessarily want to go to college. It was a default that I had to do in order to make it to that next level. And so I got there, and I was that guy that was in the gym getting stronger, and it was starting to work towards the end of my my freshman years.
And then what happened?
And my whole shoulder fell apart. So my last game, I mean, I remember it to this day. I mean, it's we're at Illinois, Chicago, beautiful field. It's a blue sky. You can see the skyline of Chicago over the outfield. I mean, just gorgeous, right? And I go to pick up a ball to warm up, and there was a pop. Everyone kind of looked over, and my arm was just hanging there. And
Oh,
it was torn. I mean, there were 6 tears in the rotator cuff. And when they eventually did the surgery, they saw another 7 or 8 tears that the scar tissue had healed over. So injuries that I played through, 3 tears in the labyrinth. And then there were some of the tendons were torn and shredded. So whenever I would throw, my shoulder would pop in and out of the socket. So
hmm,
it was to say it was a major shoulder injury is probably an understatement. They did reconstruction and all that kind of stuff, but I just wasn't. I could have played, but I wouldn't have been at that same level.
right.
And mentally having to, make that adjustment, not be able to do some of the stuff that you used to be able to do,
Yeah.
that was just that was too much for me.
So go backwards in time. You said they found other scar tissue. So which means you were playing through pain.
Yeah.
So talk about that for a second. There's so many college athletes, their fear of letting the coaches know, hey, I'm in pain, I'm feeling some trouble here. Their fear of coming off the field. Let's see if I can play through this. And these are the kind of things that happen if you don't let people know, if you let that mental control of hey, I can't leave the field, take over, you know, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was my mentality, right? I mean, you can't leave the field because you're gonna let someone else have an opportunity, and if they show well, then do you lose your opportunity? I think the other thing that I was taught early on is, you're either hurt or you're injured, and those are two different things.
Big
And
difference.
you can play through being hurt, but if you're injured, you can't play through it. And to me, it was just, it hurt, but it wasn't something that I couldn't perform. And so I just kind of kept going and played through it. But that was just and it's also the mindset of,
Right.
you don't want to let your team down.
Right.
Um, and me sitting on the bench, not being able to affect the game like I would want to. I just felt like I was letting the guys down, and that was that's the last thing you want to do if you're an athlete.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I mean, the team is everything.
Yep,
You know what I mean?
100%.
And then you feel if things don't go the right way, you feel like it's your fault.
Yep.
Wow.
If I were out on the field, that play would have turned out differently,
Yeah.
or I would have been able to get a hit off this guy, and we would have won the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The outcomes would be different.
Yep.
So playing college sports, talk about the value. We just talked about the team and they rely on it. Talk about the value you got personally from playing college athletics.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know I learned a lot about myself, and goal accomplishment and that sort of stuff. And so it was the camaraderie, the team, being able to know that you can elevate and play at that next level. But I think it was the goal accomplishment that really was the main thing that college sports provided me. And so, like I mentioned, I was not a power hitter coming out of high school, and we would have double headers. We would have our games, and by the time we'd drive back in, it'd be late at night. I was in the gym lifting, right? And I was getting stronger, and this was before we actually had trainers there teaching you how to lift, right? So I was doing everything I could to get stronger, and I went from 185 pounds to 205 pounds, and
Wow.
it was a lot of muscle. And so anytime I wasn't on the field practicing, I was in the gym. And what that got me is towards the end of that freshman season, I hit a ball, and I always remember this. I hit a ball that we had a guy on third base, and usually if you hit a fly ball in the outfield, he's tagging up, and you're going to get a run, right? I hit a ball. It was right to the right fielder, but it was hit, and his back was against the fence. It was hit so hard that he caught it and threw it in, and the guy on third base didn't have an opportunity to tag up.
Tag up.
And what they did is they checked my bat. They thought it was an illegal bat,
Worked.
and it was all within the regulations and
Yeah.
everything. And afterward, we were shaking hands with the team, and their coach came up and said, "I've never seen a ball hit that hard." He apologized. He's like, "Listen, I'm sorry, but I have never seen a ball hit that hard. Good job. Keep doing what you're doing, but I
Yeah.
apologize. Like, I wouldn't have done that had I known, and I was
Yeah.
cool with it, whatever. I was actually mad that my guy didn't take up.
Yeah.
It was out, it was versus a sacrifice, and so I was pissed at that. But yeah, I mean, so it showed me that, hey, if you put your mind to something, uh, and you put in the work, you can
Yeah.
achieve.
Anything can happen, right?
Yep.
So talk about the injury, talk about the moment when either the doctor, your parents, the coaches, maybe all three of them together said, "Hey, Ryan, you're done."
Yeah, I mean, it was the doctor and me really kind of coming to that. I mean, it was horrifying, right? Because again, school wasn't my strong suit, and everything, my success in life, I was banking on baseball. And now all of a sudden, baseball is taken away from me. And so, what do you do? Who are you outside of being an athlete? I was definitely depressed, um, and I worried about what I was going to do. Right, anxiety, all these sorts of things that I'd never really dealt with before, all of a sudden hit at once, and it just takes you out of your day. You don't know who you are.
Yep.
Yeah, I
You,
didn't
you
know who
lose
I
your
was.
identity. Your
Yeah,
identity's out the window. So
yeah.
how did you handle that? Did you go to your parents? Did you go to the coach? Did you see a therapist? Like, how did you that far back? Not like it was forever ago, but like it wasn't like the thing that let people know what's going on in your mind back then.
No, I mean, I dealt with it all internally, right?
Ugh.
Because, going to a therapist back then meant you were crazy,
Yeah.
right? I was that's not the truth, but that's what the stigma
The
was.
stigma.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you don't want to talk, the coach, he has to move on. I can't play anymore. So, I'm off the team again. Somebody else has my number. The guys on the team were great, but I don't exist to the program anymore. I am of no value to
Hmm.
the program, right? And then you don't want to let your parents know what you're dealing with, right? You don't want people to think, what's his problem and all that. So I dealt with all of it kind of internally, and I think that's where your athletic skills and development kind of come back into play, right? So I had the way I looked at it, I had no future. And so, how do I develop a future? So you go into solution mode, right? Just like, all right, I'm down 0-2. It's not how I wanted to start my at bat, but how do I adapt what I'm going to do, my strategy now, in order to get some level of success? And so, same thing going into the rest of my life. And I just thought, all right, I'm not strong academically, so my resume isn't going to look good going across people's desks. So how do I get some experience that and through an internship that I can put on the resume and hopefully open the door? And then how do I leverage my connections and
Mhm.
baseball family in order to get some of those opportunities?
Well, I mean, you're reading my mind, Ryan, because that was my next question. Is like, well, how did you handle the end of your athletic career? But that was your freshman year. You still got 3 more years to go,
Yeah.
right? And how did you handle that? And how long did it take before you came out of the funk and say, okay, I got to straighten myself out. I got to get that internship. And were there anybody else out there that helped you pull yourself out of it? If so, how'd that work out? And then what was that internship that turned you around?
Yeah. So, I kind of got into it. Probably took me about a year to get out of it. And I started hanging out more with friends, and which meant, less working out, more partying, that type of stuff. And I just kind of said to myself one day, like, you're not going to accomplish anything if you keep doing this.
Yep.
And so you got to get your act together. Like, nobody's going to come and save you. You have to figure it out on your own. And again, I just went into solution mode. And so, leveraging relationships, I got the internship. Went to school in Milwaukee. So Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I got an internship with Northwestern Mutual because, I don't know if it's still still now, but it was a really good internship. And I got, because of my relationships, I got a seat at the table in that internship. So I was definitely had the lowest GPA. And this was my sophomore year, right? It's probably the winter of my sophomore year. Definitely the lowest GPA in that internship program. I probably, if you round up, I was a 2.3 GPA. And if you look at everybody else, they were all 4 point. I didn't know you could go above 4.0, but they did, right? And so definitely didn't belong based on the resume at that table. But then it goes back into, as an athlete, I knew that I wasn't strong enough to hit home runs. I needed to get stronger, and I could outwork people in order to make that happen. And so I just outworked people. I listened more. I paid more attention to the people that had done it before me. And I just applied, I quickly applied the lessons that they taught. And if something didn't work, I didn't keep doing the thing that didn't work. I figured out how to make it work. And so, it was just outworking people and putting my head down and not letting the circumstances and what I perceived as the writing on the wall, not letting that affect how I performed.
So you just took what athletically, the athletic grit that you have mentally, and you just carried into your career.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So talk about that. Northwestern Mutual, great company. You spent an internship there, and then college ends. What happens?
Yeah, so I did 3 years of an internship there, and I did really well. I was in their top 10 and all that kind of stuff. And I just knew, growing up and going to school in Milwaukee, I just didn't want to stay there the rest of my life. And so I applied to a lot of, jobs down in the Southeast and in Texas and all that kind of stuff. And visited a buddy that was living in the Charlotte area for his wedding. And it was like November. I flew out of Milwaukee. It was snowing, and it was like 80 degrees. Leaves were on the trees, and it was sunny in North Carolina. And so I was like, man, I could do this the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so I started focusing on the Charlotte area for jobs, and I didn't hear back from anyone. And but I just decided, after I graduated, all right, I'm moving there, and I'll figure it out when I get there. I had made a little bit of money that it was, saved up, and so I could live for a couple months. I found an apartment and slept on the floor because I didn't have a bed. I didn't have, I had a 13-inch TV that
Black and white.
it was color, but you had the antennas,
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
in order to get it, because I didn't have cable, because I couldn't afford it. And so yeah, it was crazy. So I just knocked on the door of Northwestern Mutual, and that was in the Charlotte area, and said, hey, I did this up in Milwaukee. I was decent at it. Can I do it here? And they were like, well, you don't know anybody. And I'm like, it doesn't matter to me. They're like, well, that's going to hurt our retention and all that. I'm like, listen, I'm going to work harder than anybody you got in this building. And so I know I'm going to be successful. So it's whether you want to take a shot on me or not. And so, they did. And so I spent a number of years there, and eventually broke off and started my own firm. But really 25 years as a financial advisor, and then still am, but got rid of a good chunk of the firm, and started doing something else.
So they didn't know what they were getting when you were knocking on that door,
No,
right?
no. I mean, I wasn't the ideal recruit, I
No.
mean, it was different, even though I had experience, it was in a different region of the
Yeah.
country,
Yeah.
and business is just done different here in the Southeast. And so yeah, I had experience, but I didn't have Southeast experience. And so it was, how are you going to adapt? How are you going to overcome and
Yeah.
all those sorts of things? And yeah, but they did not know what they were getting
No.
into.
And again, the athletic promise comes out. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like you're just going to keep working. You know what I mean? And you know if you keep working, it's going to happen.
exactly.
You know.
I can
So
outwork my problem if I
yeah,
just keep my head down and exactly.
that's it. So now you're 25 years financial guy, and then all of a sudden, boom, here comes the book. Tell me about the book. What was the motivation behind the book? What do you do with the book? You know, and tell us that story.
Yeah, so I had the good fortune of working with a number of professional athletes on the finance side of things. But it was never when they signed the huge contract, right? It was always after they lost a bunch of money or they realized the guy that they were using wasn't doing the right thing, and it was always in rebuilding mode. And my whole goal as a financial advisor is I want to be able to have you be successful with or without me. And so it was to impart the knowledge aspect of, why we're doing what we're doing, not just doing it for you, right? So teach a man to fish versus fishing for him. And so for years they have been telling me, hey, you need to do a book because there's so many people that, need this. But I was focused on building my firm, right? And so COVID hit, and all of a sudden we all had a little bit of extra time on our hands. And I decided to, while that time was there, to start putting some thoughts together. And it was supposed to be a presentation that I was going to give to UNC Charlotte's men's basketball team, and turned into a book, and got collaboration with pro athletes, and so it's really kind of changed the trajectory of where I was going in life.
Well, I want to read the title of the book, right? Just for anybody who's listening, they want to get it. I want to make sure they hear the title. So it's Foundation for Financial Excellence: Lessons from the Pros, a Game Plan for the Collegiate Athlete. I mean, you can't explain it any better than that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And again, I for those that are listening, I highly recommend this book. I read it, and it's a phenomenal. I recommend it all the time. I use it all the time. And the people you talk about in there, the stories that happen to these people, and some pretty big names.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And you're like, how does that happen? You know,
yeah.
but it does. It definitely does. And so that's awesome. So talk about, so you wrote the book, now you're going, you're doing so many things now. I don't even know where to start with you right now because there's so many good things that you're doing. But tell me how the book launched what you're doing now.
Yeah, so the book launched about 5 or 6 days after Name, Image, and Likeness in college sports went live. And so that I it wasn't, again, I'm dyslexic, so I dictated the whole book, had an editor kind of, you know, make sure that periods and commas and all that kind of stuff lined up, and I didn't, misspell anything. But um because of NIL, I believe that the book took off, right? And so it became a bestseller, and it actually became an international bestseller because I sold one copy in Canada. It qualified me to be international. So
Okay.
it's technically an international bestseller, but that got me into this name, image, and likeness discussion, and where everybody initially in the early days of NIL was saying, "Hey, this is going to ruin college athletics and all this kind of stuff." I said, "No, I don't think that's the case. I think this is a way." I viewed myself in if I was able to participate in NIL when I was an athlete, this would have brought me back into the education space. I would have viewed this, and it would have had me focus on money lessons. It would have had me focus on marketing. It would have had me focus on how to use technology, all these things, that these skills that we need now. It would have brought me back in. I would have paid more attention. I would have put more effort into my college experience, the educational side of it. And so I just started talking about it, and that got me introduced to some folks down at Clemson. I helped them build out a course, a master's level course that they're using. It's a hugely successful course down there. Most of their athletes go through it, and that kind of then propelled me to start looking at the whole player development space that that athletes were going through, because there's good stuff out there, but how do you, but there's very low participation from the athletes, right? So how do you get athletes to participate in learning these skills that they're going to need? They know they need them, but they're so focused on all this other stuff. How do you do that? And so that
Yeah.
kind of got that swelling around in my brain, and talking to different athletes, trying to figure out, well, why did they or didn't they take part in these things, and just coming up with solutions.
So how many schools are you working with now?
Oh man, it's a number. I mean, we were fortunate enough to work with a bunch of the guys in the that went to the NFL Combine this year. We have some really good opportunities at the pro level, at the international pro level, and I think there's probably 10 or 11 schools that we're
Okay.
working with at the college level, some in
Mhm.
the Power Five and some not.
Yep.
And then on the high school and club level, I mean, we're working with, I mean, a ton of athletes at that level. And we even have some corporate, we have a corporate athlete program that we develop. So even some, corporations, as athletes transition to that next phase, we start working with them
So
as well.
you're in so many different spaces right now.
Yeah.
But it's cool how you you're almost going backwards in time to, hey, let's get the younger kids now. Let's get
Yeah.
the kids that are in maybe high school and get them more prepared, financially, literacy wise, or mental readiness. And then it goes into the college. Now they're more prepared for the college world. And then it goes into the NFL or the NBA. Or so you created this trajectory. Hey, instead of saying, hey, let's start with the guys that are already way up here, let's start lower and let's help these young guys get ready quicker, and so now they're more prepared when they get out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really work in transition periods, right? And
Yeah.
so in high school, you're either going to transition to a college athlete, or you're going to transition to the workforce, or just college, right? And out of the 7 or 8 million high school athletes, maybe 5% are going to go on and play at the college level. And so then at college, you're either going to go pro, or you're going to transition to the workforce. And so we work with them whether they're transitioning pro or transitioning to the workforce. And then after you're a pro, very few guys are like Tom Brady, right? They very few retire at
Right.
that on a high with all the
Yeah.
money and all that kind of stuff. In fact, they say in the NFL the average lifespan's like 3 to 5 years. But I had a D1 coach tell me that if you take out the 10% longer, the tenured guys that have been around 10 or plus years, your average stay in the NFL is like 10 months. And
Wow.
so really, really short. So they're going to have to transition out of that and
Quick.
get some sort of career
Yeah.
afterward. So
Yeah.
how do we then help them with that? And then as they transition into that career, how do we help them leverage these skills that they already have? They just don't understand how to leverage them and use them for the job,
Right.
versus just using it for athletics.
Yeah. And if we go backwards to your story about, when you got hurt, you said you got into a funk, little depression, anxiety. I mean, so many athletes get hurt, and their careers ended in a second. But then there's ones, like you said, hey, 10 months in the NFL. These guys think they're going to be there 10, 12, 15 years. 10 months, they're out.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to kind of go, hey, a must win. The new company that you have, which is there to help these guys. You obviously, you're going to tell more about it, but from my where I sit, it's there to get these guys ready for life after the game, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And even though they're totally focused on playing and succeeding, sooner or later they got to wake up and say, "Hey, this isn't going to last forever. What's next?" So talk about what motivated you to start the company called A Must Win. What goes on there, and what do you accomplish in there?
Yeah, so I started a must win and we merged. So it's Success Beyond Game Day in partnership with a must win. So I'm working with a stud, Samantha Card, out of Florida on that. And so it's two people that aligned on vision, aligned on values, and we're really making some space. But what I saw with myself and the athletes that I worked with is you don't start thinking of yourself as someone other than an athlete until your athletic career is done. And sometimes not even then. Sometimes it takes 5 years, 10 years before you come to the realization that, hey, that era of my life is over. And so for me, I had a wasted year, but for some of these athletes, they have a wasted 5 years, a wasted decade, sometimes longer, right? And so how the goal is, how as they develop as athletes, do we give them the evidence and help them develop who they are outside of being an athlete? And so we built out some really cool tools working with neuroscientists and sports psychologists where, they take an assessment that helps us identify how they communicate. Based on how they communicate, how they, what types of careers they naturally would have success in, because 70% of college kids are going to study and get a major in something, and they're never going to use it in a career that they pursue.
Yeah.
And so, how do we identify what types of careers you're gonna have some strengths in, and start moving that direction earlier in life? How do we show you your strengths, your weaknesses, all those sorts of things? So we start with that, and then we have a text-based system where we have specifically designed questions to help you develop who you are outside of being an athlete. We have a really cool dashboard. We're measuring things like heart, grit, storytelling, mindfulness, curiosity, all these sorts of things. We, up until now haven't been able to measure, but we're able to measure these things now. And so how do we give you the evidence and then the data and the experience to tell your story, figure out your story, and then tell it in a way that aligns with who you are, so that when you get that transition period and you're interviewing for a job, you're setting yourself apart, or you're like with the combine guys we worked with, you're getting interviewed by scouts, coaches, GMs, all these. How do you set yourself apart? Because when you get to the corporate world, the NFL, the NBA, everybody's good. Everybody has talent. You're
Right.
not going to outshine, maybe that rare 1% of 1% is going to be so talented that they're going to shine brighter than everybody else. But everybody's talented, right? As you have elevate up in profession and league and all that, the talent gap narrows so much that it's not about your talent. It's about your mental ability. It's about your mindset. It's being able to communicate, diffuse conflict, all these sorts of things, and take the lessons you learned as an athlete, give you some evidence and some science behind it so you can understand who you are. And then how do you talk about it? How do you communicate it so that now you're getting opportunities that, you would have had to wait, 5 years, 10 years, hop a different couple corporations, move states, interview for different jobs. And we can accelerate that success that you're going to have in life, because we're accelerating that self-awareness and teaching you how to then apply that to life beyond sports.
And I mean, that's amazing. And the word you use, communicate. The young people today, they struggle communicating.
Yeah.
They're so used to texting, and they don't have a they don't they don't know how to put the words together, and go out there and have a conversation when it's time. It's when it's go time, it's show time. They can play their sport, they can their game, but all of a sudden it's, hey, I got to have a conversation with the coach, and you got to impress the heck out of the coach, the kid. So the coach's like, wow, this guy or this girl is sharp. Like it's like pulling teeth to get them to talk sometimes. Now, obviously, there's a lot of athletes out there that are very articulate and very communicative, but majority of young people today, they struggle, to
Struggle. Yeah.
communicate,
And
you
so
know?
how do we get them? You learn most through failure. And so how do we, through our program, get them to fail? And so that when the spotlight's on them and they have to show up and perform, they do so, right? And so we're able to pull out, a lot of times we think we're saying something, but the person we're talking to is receiving different words, right? They
Yeah.
receive a different message than what we think we're sending. And so we're able to pull the words that people are hearing based on what you're saying, so that you can say, is my message even landing?
Yeah.
and being able to, adjust that message. So you're practicing, you're failing, so that again, when you're in the spotlights on you and it's game time, you're able to perform.
So tell me about that mental readiness program. What do the athletes have to do? How long does it last? Like, and what's the communication during that time frame, and what are they actually doing?
Yeah, so we work in 7 week sprints, right? So we call them mind labs. We have a base mind lab. We have NFL readiness mind lab, NBA readiness mind lab. We have in season mind labs, the psychology of money mind lab, NIL mind labs, all these sorts of things. They're all 7 week sprints, right? And so in that 7 weeks, you're going to get between 2 and 3 text messages. All you have to do is respond to the text messages. You're going to be tribed up with people that have shared values. And so you're going to be able to see, oh, this is, this person is saying something, and wow, I didn't think about that. That triggers this memory in my life. So the type of information we get out of these athletes is really incredible. They open up more than they naturally would just in a normal conversation, right? Because it's a safe place for them
Yeah.
to communicate. So they go through that. Through those 7 weeks, we do a 30-minute meeting, either on site or over Zoom, and we're talking about some sort of development. But it's not us lecturing, right? That's the cool thing. It's they're interacting like we're interacting, right? So it's all right. Tell me what are your values, and having them explain this, but being able to look through the Zoom or in person and say, well, this is what you're communicating to me with your nonverbals. And so how do we get them to communicate in the right way so that they're making the impact that they want to make? How do we get them to understand and articulate who they are outside of being an athlete? And then how do we get them to kind of show that and promote that throughout the conversations they're having? A lot of times we bring in sport specific athletes. I mean, we had a volleyball club we worked with, and we had some pro volleyball players come in to like surprise them and share what their experience was getting recruited, playing in college,
Mm.
getting to the pro level, what they needed to work on. We've had NFL guys join football mind labs, that high school football mind labs. So imagine being a high school athlete, and you're thinking you're coming on for a 30-minute session, and you see you have a guy that's been a 15-year NFL vet
Oh,
talking to you about what you need to focus on, what he experienced, and what's important, what's not important. We got some basketball ones. We're getting ready to have some pro guys come in and do some talks with these kids. So
I mean, it's got to
it's
be
not
so
just hearing
impactful.
it. Oh, it's huge, right? Because they're not just hearing it from us. These athletes, and there's no, we don't script it. They talk about whatever they want to talk about,
Yeah.
but it lines up with everything we're teaching them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the impact is huge. The engagement is huge. And then we have their kind of online community portal, which they can always go back and review. But even the text exchanges, the comments, people from different parts of the country sharing stories, commenting on each other's stories, building, relationship with
Yeah.
each other, is it's been phenomenal. It's been
That is so cool. And how many athletes have gone through that so far?
thousands. I don't know. I couldn't tell you offhand. I mean, there's thousands that have gone through it.
That's great.
We serve at smaller schools. We serve as their, colleges. We serve as their player development. At the larger Power Fives, they have their material. Let them present it, but let us help identify. One of the things we can do is we can help create a completely customized and a unique player development path for each athlete, depending on what they need and what their interests are. So instead of having your football team sitting in front of NIL talk, where maybe 10% are going to pay attention,
If that.
we can then split up,
Yeah.
right? We can say, all right, well, here are the 10% of each sport that are going to benefit most from the NIL talk, and these are what these athletes need. And so we're able to completely spike engagement among all the player development programs, and we're able to do the analytics behind it,
Yeah.
right? Dashboards and all that kind of stuff. It's really
Yeah.
cool. And then in the in season, right? Think about being a college coach, and you're I always, the Eagles this year are a great example. They started off 8 wins and then they had 6 or 7 losses, right? They
Yeah.
made the playoffs, but barely. So what happened inside that locker room? Well, they're trying to figure that out now. But what if you could figure that out in the second loss versus
Yeah.
having to wait till the seventh loss? And so we're able to measure mindset and help, come with a prescription for locker room issues before they really become
Yeah.
issues. It's really
So,
cool.
I mean, talking about that for a second, so the locker room issues, the mindset issues, what kind of things do you think you'll uncover? If you use the Eagles, if they were let you come in there and do that, would be really cool.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you think you might uncover in there? Hey, an 8 wins, 8 straight wins, 6 losses, and they barely survived, and then they lose at the end. What kind of things do you think you'd uncover?
So my guess would be, and we did not measure them. I wish we could have, but we were not able to measure them. But my guess would be the grit measurement that we're able to take would have fallen among some of the players, and then next would have followed the heart component, right?
Mm,
And so if we're able to identify, all right, the defensive backs or the wide receivers, their grit side of the measurement has fallen below where the rest of the team is. Now we can go to the receivers and say, hey, what's the issue? I mean, the Eagles have their own sports psychologist, so they
yeah.
can go in and they can say, hey, what's going on? We noticed this measurement. Like, let's solve some of these issues. Let's figure it out. And they can be proactive in figuring out problems versus how it works now and being reactive with it.
That's so cool. So let me ask you this question: like, what motivated you to do all this stuff? Like, you write the book, and then your hands in so many different things. Like, what motivates a guy like you to say, I'm going to accomplish all this stuff, and I'm gonna put my finger on the pulse. I'm going to make a difference. It's you're making history. It's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
This is stuff that's never been done before. What's driving you to do this?
Yeah, I think there were two things, right? There were one was the impact. My financial firm, extremely successful, and I had success, but I may not have been 100% fulfilled all the time. And I started, COVID gave a lot of time for a lot of people to kind
Yeah.
of think about, what's really important. And to me, it was I want to impact people, and there's people that aren't being impacted that they're going to live, and a lot of these came from stories that some of the NFL guys told me is where I grew up, if you didn't make it to the league, you repeated a lot of the stuff that you saw growing up, and a lot of times that wasn't a good scenario. And so that didn't mean these kids didn't have talent. I mean, a kid could have been left behind that could have cured cancer, right? But didn't get that opportunity because no one gave him the tools and the evidence to show him that they could, right? And so,
Yes.
how do you make an impact among all athletes and show them that what they're doing day to day on the field is just the starting block for what they can do for the rest of their life? And so it was the impact component. How can I impact someone that is never going to meet me? I'm going to be dead and gone for decades. They're gonna go through our program, and they're going to be better off than they were had we not done this, right? So it was
Mm,
about the impact, and then it was about the challenge, because when we started saying, well, why can't we measure heart? Why can't we measure grit? Why can't we measure curiosity? And everyone's saying, no, it can't be done, it can't be done. And just saying, again, that athlete comes back out in you. Oh, you telling me I can't make it to the next level? Okay, I'm just going to prove you wrong. And so it was the impact, but then everyone's saying can't be done, don't even try, you're gonna fail, and putting the nose to the grindstone and figuring out a way to make it happen.
So where's it going from here? Like, if what's the vision look like? What's the future look like? Where are you going?
Yeah, so our goal is to impact 1 billion athletes.
Oof.
And so that's the company's goal. And so how do we do that? It's uh, changing the mindset of athletes and then providing the platforms in order for them to be successful, right? So could be podcasting, getting some of those up so that we can lend a voice to these athletes. Um, apparel, all this type of stuff that's kind of evolving behind the scenes. But at the core of it is, how do we get athletes to figure out that, to think bigger, that they're able to accomplish more than what they ever thought that they could accomplish. And it's all because of that foundation of athletics, that that's going to help propel them to the success. You know, how do we then work inside corporate America, because corporate America loves hiring athletes, but all the systems they have in place from applying online weed out all the athletes. They weed out the people they're trying to hire, because the athletes don't have a huge resume because they've been playing sports.
Right.
And so how do we connect the athlete and the corporation, but then help that athlete transition to experience extreme success inside that corporation? Changing, you know, a lot of the tools we have can change the HR and evaluation process, to be able to measure some of those things moving forward. You know, some of the, you need to work on these things. Well, we can measure those now. And so it's really, you know, that's the start of it. And, you know, who knows? I mean, all I know is that if you say we can't do something, we're going to figure out a way to do it.
You're gonna do it. I mean, that's incredible. So how can people contact you? How can, because I'm hoping that a lot of people listen to this, and it spreads into the different schools and athletic programs. And if somebody hears, hey, I got to get a hold of this guy, how can they reach you?
Yeah, for sure. Successbeyondgameday.com is the website. My email is ryan@successbeyondgameday.com. And then Instagram DMs. I mean, I get a lot of people that hit me up there. It's at amust.win. So amust.win.
Cool. Well, Ryan, this has been great, and the things you're accomplishing, it's amazing what you're doing. And the kids today, the young athletes today, they don't really know how to show their gratitude. You know what I mean? But I know there's so many kids out there that are saying, wow, I am so happy that I'm part of these programs. I'm so happy for a guy like you to come in and make this impact and want to give. For a young man who had something, such a promising athletic career just taken away in a second. So most guys like, heck with that. I can't be bothered. I don't, you know what I mean? They just walk away. You took that pain, you took the grit that you had, and you turned it into a career that's just impacting so many people.
It's been a blast. I appreciate that.
It's phenomenal. And I'm enjoying the ride watching you, because I watch all this stuff you're doing on all your videos. And when's the next book coming out? That's what I want to know. When's the next book coming out? Because all the stuff you're doing, I mean, this whole mental readiness, there's got to be a book coming out for that.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see from us is some papers come out, some white papers come out. I mean, we've teamed up with John King, who, if corporate America knows about him, but Phil Jackson basically attributed his success at managing people to John King. We've teamed up with him to help athleticize a lot of his material and help on the corporate side of corporate athlete. But so we're going to do some white papers with him, get some stuff published. And my next book, I don't know. I think it might be The Ride or something like that, right? Where it's all right, what have been the ups and the downs? And because so many people think, hey, you decide you're going to do something, and all of a sudden you have success. They don't understand the failures and how you adapt and change. So that's kind of been in my mind, doing something about what are the failures, how do we adapt, how do we overcome, and at the end of the day become successful.
Well, that's awesome. Wait, I mean, your book that you wrote, and let's sit here in my desk, keep looking at it. It inspired me to do these kind of things. Okay. And my goal here, and you're part of this, is I want to do 100 podcasts. I don't know if maybe I mentioned this to you. And I want to take this information and condense it into a book. And I want to take this book to the college athletic programs and say, here's 100 different former or current athletes who have dealt with so many, maybe great successes as well as misfortunes, and how they handled it. and these stories can be so impactful because there's so many young kids like you, your catcher freshman year, who may have just sat in that dorm room and said, I'm just giving up.
Yeah.
And your story is so compelling to get these young athletes to say there's a lot more after the game is over.
Yep.
And you just got to be ready.
Absolutely.
Which is cool. So Ryan, this is great. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time out of your day to spend with me. And I know all the listeners out there, they're really going to enjoy this and they're going to get a lot from it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate our friendship. And I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, it's going to go live real soon. I'll let you know. And I'm sure we're going to impact so many people. But thanks again. And I'm definitely going to tap you on the shoulder to come back, because I want more people to hear all the other things that you're going to continue to do.
Absolutely. You got it.
Okay, Ryan.